But you can start. Thank you so much for your patience.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize in advance. My kids are about to head out of the house to go to school, so it's a little bit noisy upstairs. But I'm going to share my screen here and walk through a couple projects that we have created at the Alliance for Secure Democracy, where I work, to help sort of track and monitor state-backed propaganda, but also to try to identify and mitigate some of the risks of what we call information laundering. So I'll share my screen here first.
What can you put here? Okay. Yeah.
Are you able to hear me when I speak?
That's perfect.
I can hear when you speak, but it's totally garbled, so I can't understand anything. If you can hear me clearly and can just type that in the chat, I can go ahead. I just can't hear. Let me try to remove my microphone. Okay. As long as you can hear me, that's all that matters right now. So thank you for having me. My name is Brett Schaffer. I'm a senior fellow with the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which is part of the German Marshall Fund. And so our work at the Alliance looks at trying to track state-backed propaganda, largely from Russia, China, and Iran. So a lot of what we do at the Alliance is build tools. So these are tools to both track the outputs of state-backed actors, but also to try to track where that content is showing up across the open web. So one of our first tools that we developed that continues to be sort of the main tool that we use is a tool called Hamilton 2.0. And so what Hamilton does is it looks for and finds accounts across Telegram, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and state-backed websites. And then it aggregates all of the information that we collect from actors that we have attributed to either China, Russia, or Iran. So when you go to the dashboard, you would then see all of the information that has been posted by any of the accounts that we have said this account definitively is part of the sort of state-backed propaganda apparatus. So at any given time, you can go and get a sense of what the most prominent accounts are, what messages are being shared the most, where those messages are being shared, but also things like the key phrases that are being mentioned most, countries that are being mentioned the most often. And then we allow you to search also through our data. So if you went to our social data search tool here, and you were interested in figuring out what has been posted about Armenia, you could just go run basically a Google search, and you would get every post that we have collected in our data set that mentions Armenia in it. So this, at some level, is a relatively simple tool. All it's doing is figuring out how to use open APIs. It does some scraping. The real complexity is actually translating all of this information globally into English, so it's actually searchable if you're not speaking all of those sort of native languages. But it's a relatively straightforward approach. So if you're interested in something like this for a particular issue set, so whether you had interest in, for example, posts that are very specific to the region. So if you wanted to look at posts relevant to Armenia, Azerbaijan, the issues there, you could create your own data set with whatever accounts and then basically plug those into a system where you're collecting, aggregating, and then it allows for a sort of deeper level of analysis. One of the other tools that we are about to release publicly in the next few weeks, but it is pretty much ready to go right now, is a tool called the Information Laundromat. So what the Information Laundromat does is it allows you to take an article, a piece of text, a text snippet, a quote, and basically run it through here and see where that content is showing up across the open web. So if you were able to take, for example, an RT article, you could run it through here and you would come up with everywhere across the open web where that same article or a similar article has appeared. I'm going to switch over actually just to presentation mode here, because it's going to be a little bit easier to walk through what this looks like. So when we talk about information laundering, what are we talking about? So it's basically the process of moving a piece of information, often false or misleading information, from a less credible into a more credible source. So if you think of the Russian nesting dolls, the Matryoshka dolls, what we're finding online and is creating a great problem for the sort of health of the information space is that a lot of times sources are being hidden within other websites. So you'll see an article that appears on a credible site or a blog that doesn't seem to be suspicious or malicious, but in fact that blog is reposting content from another site, it's reposting from another site, from another site. So it creates what we call a cascading citation. And of course, when you're talking about information literacy or digital literacy, what's the key to that? The key is understanding the source, right? If you understand the source, you know whether or not the source is credible, whether it has biases, and by masking the original source, you make it almost impossible for information consumers to understand whether or not they should trust the information that they are seeing. So there's a long history of information laundering going back to the pre-digital age, but I'm just going to skip forward here to the digital age and show what this looks like. So here's an article about Russia claiming that the US is testing biological weapons in the country of Georgia. Now, this appeared in Deutsche Welle, a German state media, a very trusted media source. But where it actually originated was a Georgian blog. And so you see here this sort of pathway that it takes to run into a credible site. So it moves from a Georgian blog to another sort of conspiratorial blog, Russian state media, to a blog, to a very sort of prominent US kind of far-right conspiracy site, and then it jumps into the mainstream media. So what we've built, as I showed, is this tool called the Disinformation Laundromat, with the hope that it will actually help to create a better sort of mapping of the pathways in which information travels online. This would be a great kind of tool to work on during the hackathon. I mean, obviously not something identical, but a similar thing is to understand better how to identify where information originated from, but also how it is being shown to users. So for example, recommendation algorithms. You know, as all of you are probably well aware, when you go to YouTube, when you go to other sites that sort of algorithmically process and promote information, there's an algorithm that takes your initial interest and then it sort of presents additional pieces of content to you. So a better mapping of how that works, I think, would be a great thing to work on during the hackathon, because then it would allow the information consumers to better understand how information gets to them, why it gets to them in that way, and also where it originated from. So just to show you sort of a case study of how we've used the Information Laundromat tool, hopefully to sort of spark other ideas that you could do along this line. So we had found an article, but this is Russian state media. It could be anything. And we wanted to see where else this article was appearing online, and if it was appearing in places where it wasn't entirely transparent that the article itself came from Russian state media. So we ran just a basic Bing search for it, and we found all of these other sites where seemingly a nearly identical article was appearing. Now, one of those sites is this thing called the Big News Network that has about 550 sort of faux local regional outlets. So all of these things, from the Brazil Sun to the Afghanistan, Sun, they're all run by one big conglomerate network. And oftentimes that network is taking content from Russian state media or Chinese state media and presenting it as if it was being produced locally. So another network that we found was this sort of faux local news network in the United States. This one was called Little Rock AR News. So Little Rock is a town in the US state of Arkansas. It appears to be a local news site. You even have a journalist here who is supposedly the one who's authoring this article. But this journalist does not exist. That's an AI-generated image. Judy Allen is not a real person. And so one of the things that we could look at would be to better map out who the authors are, who are the sources of content, because we find this is a very common tactic with mis and disinformation networks. They attribute articles to fake journalists. So that would be a great project to actually look at how journalists are attributed to articles, if they're authentic, if they are producing an unreasonable amount of content. So for example, Judy Allen, the day that we found this article, had supposedly published about 550 articles that day. Obviously, that's impossible. So something that could better sort of map out these fictitious authors and expose the fact that they're not real, either by identifying the fact that images are AI generated, or by mapping out how many pieces of content they were supposedly producing each day. So anyway, this article, this original RT article, was appearing here in Little Rock AR News. And what we had found is that they were changing certain words in the articles, and they were doing that because it helps to avoid plagiarism detection or spam detection at Google and Bing. So they were just using synonyms to change specific words. Once we found that pattern, we found that they were republishing this altered piece of content through a wide network of these fake local news sites. So not only was it in Little Rock AR News, it was in Albuquerque Breaking News. So Albuquerque is a city in New Mexico in the United States. And I'm going to skip past that quickly. But what we found between the two is that they were changing many of the different aspects of the site around. So the landing pages were different. You saw, as you probably saw, there was a fairly similar structure to the website, but they were changing the text between the two sites. But what they forgot to do is change the Our Team section. So between those two websites that were presenting themselves as being authentic local news sites, they had the exact same team of editors. Now, this is, of course, impossible, but it is also a great lead for open source intelligence, because once we had the Our Team section, we could search it, and we found 150 of these fake local news sites that were presenting themselves as being authentic American local news outlets. So when you're approaching, I think the sort of hackathon, when you take the sort of hackathon approach to this, there's two different ways you could do it. One is you can look at the content itself, if you're looking at information launderers, and try to see where similar content is appearing across the web. The other is to do a little bit of digital forensics, looking at the websites themselves. So I'll skip back up. And what we've created is a bunch of tiered indicators that, if we find matches between two or more sites, give us a pretty strong idea that there may be a connection between the two. So for example, if sites are sharing Google AdSense IDs, we know with a pretty high degree of certainty they're being run by one person or one entity. So for those of you who come to this with a pretty solid technical know-how, maybe with some open source intelligence experience, looking at the structures of websites themselves is a great place to start if you want to build a tool to identify malicious behavior, because oftentimes you'll find patterns between these sites that would lead you to better understand whether or not there was a malicious intent between the two sites. Now, AI has created some real challenges for us in the detection space. The example I just showed you is from about 1.5 years ago, and we ran this before ChatGPT was really in the hands of almost everyone. So of course now, if you were running a similar network, you wouldn't need to change a few words between the sites. You could just take that original RT article, put it into ChatGPT, and you would come up with hundreds of different headlines, entirely different articles. And so the ability for the search engines, but also for us on the defender side, to identify whether or not that content originally appeared somewhere else has become much more difficult. This would be a great challenge to try to tackle during the hackathon. How do we identify content that has been altered through ChatGPT, perhaps auto-translated or just textually changed, but is connected back to an original source material? So again, auto-translation is another difficult one for us to detect. So if we had an issue of English language content from a propaganda outlet, from an extremist site that was being auto-translated into Armenian, that is something that our current tools could not detect. And we've already found examples of this working. We just published a piece looking at how Russian state propaganda, originally published in Russian or in English, was being laundered into Poland, presumably after being passed through auto-translation. So that allows it to bypass all of the restrictions on search engines, on social media platforms, etc. So some of the other AI detection challenges, beyond this content alteration, which I just mentioned, there is the ability, of course, to swap out different images, to use AI-generated images into stories. So anything that would help detect that would be hugely valuable for those of us looking to detect state propaganda or disinformation. AI can also create sort of dynamic websites that could change up the content and the structure. That used to take quite a bit of time, obviously, to set up a new and entirely different website. So that's how we were able to detect patterns between networked websites. That's now going to become far more difficult. Then there's, of course, this sort of adversarial attack. So AI is going to learn, and with machine learning, they can create websites that are specifically designed to mislead AI detection. So there's this sort of idea of using decoys, for example. So you create a lot of noise in the information space, making it harder to detect the real threat actors. But of course, AI also comes with some opportunities, and these may be some things that you might want to investigate if you're looking to create a more sort of technical product during the hackathon. So for example, you could look at sort of DOM tree similarity between sites and use AI-generated tools or AI technology to learn sort of the complex patterns between different sites, and also anomaly detection. So machine learning can be used to identify unusual patterns that may suggest disinformation or misinformation. So for example, if a website is linked to a significant number of other sites with dubious content, this could be a red flag. So anything that used to be manual and time-consuming, to create a tool that can cut down the amount of time that an analyst would have to search things out, or would sort of improve an analyst's ability to detect, would be highly beneficial for the research community. And then there's a lot of things that can be done around clustering and classification. So we see this a lot with new tools that come on the market. This is a real value in being able to aggregate and cluster information into certain categories. So if certain pieces of content or website have characteristics and are similar, to organize those in one place, in one group, really helps to be able to sort of trim down the amount of things that we need to look at as investigators. Also can help, again, with translation tools. So one of the threats of AI generation is it makes it easier to take an original piece of content, let's say it was created in English, and have it amplified across every other language possible that you might want to target. But of course, on the flip side, NLP can be used with to automatically translate content from different languages. So that will help you also to try to identify where this might be happening. So let's say we're concerned about where English language content from RT is appearing elsewhere. Well, we also have the technology to auto-translate that and see where it's appearing elsewhere. So this would be a great thing, I think, to work on, is to look exactly at how we can potentially do a better job of identifying auto-translated content by doing effectively the same thing and allowing us to try to match and identify when that content has been auto-translated and amplified and distributed across a wide array of networks. So those are just a few sort of basic ideas of the kind of tools that we have built at ASD and things that we're looking to build now that we're kind of running up against the AI threat. But obviously there's a range of different opportunities here with the hackathon. So you can go very technical, like an information laundromat, where you can try to figure out indicators across websites or indicators with content to do a better job of exposing mis and disinformation sites. But you could also go really non-technical at some level and better explain this world to information consumers. You know, we obviously have a media and digital literacy deficit. I think one of the challenges we've run into is, okay, it's one thing to try to instruct high school, college-age students about this, but how do we explain some of these things to generations who are just coming online? So that's getting earlier and earlier. I have a 4-year-old who can, of course, use a smartphone at this point, but also older generations who are outside of school, who didn't grow up with this technology. Is there a way to better explain the threat landscape to them to protect them from information threats? Even basic things like understanding how search engines work. This is something that is just not well understood. So I think there's a wide range of things you can try to tackle here, depending on your technical abilities as well. One could be very, very technical and could get into the weeds of trying to expose malicious behavior at a technical level. And the other goes way in the other direction of just doing better storytelling. So because this is technical, because most people don't have technical degrees, how do we do a better job of explaining to the public what the threats are, how information systems work, maybe building even sort of a widget or other kind of browser extension that would help in real time inform users of the websites that they're encountering. So we see a lot of this with technologies like NewsGuard in the United States, which effectively creates a nutritional label for website, saying we know what this website is, it's transparent, it has all of these indicators that fit with sort of journalistic best practices, down to those sites that we know this website is malicious. So is there a way to integrate a web extension that would give people a better indication of the news and the information they're consuming? That would also be a great project. So I will pause there and open it up to any questions, which hopefully I can understand. I may try to remove my microphone and see if the sound comes better without my headphones in.
Nice, but
կներեք ժողովուրդ ջան, մի հատ հասկանալի չի կատարվում։ Ոչ մի հատ էլ
Okay. Okay. Հա,
Առաջարկում եմ հետևյալը, ժողովուրդ ջան, շնորհակալություն ձեզ շատ կներեք։ Քանի որ Բրեթը մեզ չի լսում, մենք ենթադրում ենք դա իր ինտերնետից, հա ես առաջարկում եմ այսպես։ Եթե դուք Բրեթի ներկայացրածի վերաբերյալ հարցեր ունեք, բարձրաձայնե, ես type կանեմ տեքստերի մեջ, այդպես փորձենք հարցերի պատասխանները ստանալ։ Okay. Okay. Okay, շատ լավ։ Քանի որ Բրեթը մեզ չի լսում, ես առաջարկում եմ մի անգամ առանց բարձրախոսի շարունակել։ Ես եկեք ուրեմն շարունակեմ, եթե հարցեր ունեք, խնդրում եմ վերջում մեզ գրավոր տալ, մենք կփոխանցենք անպայման, ես ուղղակի հիմա ուզում եմ ձեզ ներկայացնել մեր հաջորդ հյուրերին, ովքեր որ ձեզ ավելի մանրամասն Հայաստանում իրավիճակը կներկայացնեն, Գեղամին Վարդանյան եւ Օֆելիան Սիմոնյան, մեդիա նախաձեռնությունների կենտրոնից։ Խնդրեմ, դուք Գեղամ ջան, Օֆելիա ջան, դուք կարող եք ավելի մանրամասն ներկայանալ։ Հա, մերսի շատ։
Ես կոմպ կարող եմ։
Հա, մի հատ արագ Բրեթին։
Մի տեքստից խոսել ինչեվ այսպես է լավ թե այսպես։ Այսպես լավ է։ Միկրոֆոն թե առանց։ Չէ, առանց միկրոֆոն թե միկրոֆոն։ Հա, այդպես լավ։ Բարև ձեզ։ Մենք այստեղ մեդիա նախաձեռնությունների կենտրոնից երկու հոգով ենք, Օֆելիան Սիմոնյան, փաստեր ստուգող լրագրող է։ Ես խմբագիրն եմ մեդիայում կայքի եւ լրագրող եմ ու մենք ճիշտն ասած այս պահին տենց ֆորմալ պրեզենտացիա չունենք, բայց մենք կպատմենք մեր մասին, ցույց կտանք ընդհանրապես ինչ կա ու կուզենք որ հարցերի պատասխան լինի, հարցեր լինեն ու պատասխաններ, որովհետև ուզում ենք որ իրոք տեսնել մոտիվացված ու ապագա մասնակիցներ հեքըթոնի, այդ տեսակետից այդ շատ կարևոր է։ Քանի որ հեքըթոնի չեք hack2check, ճիշտ եմ ասում։ Hack2check կամ hatchback կամ hatchcheck մի խոսքով կապված փաստերի ստուգումը կարևոր մաս է մեդիա եւ մեր աշխատանքի մի քիչ կպատմենք ընդհանրապես ինչ են ասում փաստեր ստուգել լրագրողները ընդհանրապես ինչի համար Հայաստանի ինչ կա այդ թեմայով եւ ինչ ռեսուրսներ կան որ կարող գուցե ձեր համար մտքեր կտան Արտաստուգումը որպես այդպեսին կան երկու տեսակի Այսինքն ինչ-որ դասական եւ ինչ-որ արել են բոլոր նրանք, ովքեր որ լրագրությամբ են զբաղվել հարգանքի մասնագիտություն, ինչ-որ սովորում են համալսարաններում, այսինքն որ մենք կոչվում ենք խմբագրություններում փաստերի ստուգում կամ ներքին ստուգում, ներքին փաստերի ստուգում, այսինքն երբ որ լրագրում է հոդված, այդ հոդվածը ուղարկվում է խմբագրին կամ այդ հոդվածը խմբագրությունում կամ մարդ հատուկ որ զբաղվում է փաստերի ստուգումով, ինչ է այնտեղ ստուգվում մարդկանց անունները ճիշտ գրելը ամենապարզ բանն եմ ասում, ծննդյան թվերը, բնակավայրերի ճիշտ գրավորումները եւ այլն։ Դա սեփական process է, բայց դա մի բան է, որ լրագրության ամբողջ պատմության ընթացքում եղել է հիմա էլ կա։ ժամանակի ընթացքում դարի սկզբին եւ հետագայում սոցիալական որպես այդպեսին շատ սկսեց ավելի ազդեցիկ ու մեծ լինելու ծավալում մեծ դեր խաղալ, որովհետև ցանկացած մեծ իրադարձության ժամանակ, որ տեղի ունենում, լինի թայֆուն, նետվեկություն, ինքնաթիռի բեկություն, կամ ավելի շատ մատու համերգ միջոցառում միջոցառումների ժամանակ կամ իրադարձությունների ժամանակ ստացվում էին զբաղվում այդ գործով, իրենք էին մտածում զանգերում հետ խոսեն, բայց տեխնոլոգիայի զարգացմամբ, ինտերնետի զարգացմամբ, սոցիալական մեդիայի զարգացմամբ մենք ունենք քանի մարդ կա բնակչության մոլորակի 8 միլիարդ 7.5 միլիարդ պոտենցիալ լրագրող Այսինքն դրանց իր խոսով ամբողջությամբ մեդիավերլուծության պատրաստ միավոր է։ Ոնց այդպես կարող եմ արտահայտվել։ Այսինքն վիդեո նույնիսկ եթե ինչ խմբավորում ինտերնետ որպեսզի դա Կիշոնը մողի եթե դուրս գա դա թղթակիցը ձեր։ Այդ զարգացումը տեխնոլոգիաների եւ սոցիալական մեդիայի բերեցրել խմբագրությունները ձեր պատկերացած իդեալական խմբագրությունները, չգիտեմ, CNN-ը կարող է լինել թե BBC-ն, թե Fox News-ը, որը ուզում է լինի, կամ էլ Russia-Today-ը, Աստված չանի։ Ասենք թե մտածեցին ինչ անենք այդ ինֆորմացիոն հոսքերի հետ, հա։ Պետք է դասնակից վերցնենք, օգտվել այդ ինֆորմացիայից թե չէ։ Ոնց որ լավ, այսինքն չմրցակցելու հարցեր կան, բայց երևի թե այս դեպքում այդ չենք դիտարկում, բայց դրանք ականատեսների վկայություն կամ օգտատերերի կողմից ստեղծված բովանդակություն։ Եվ հարցը առաջացավ, որ այդ օգտատերերի ստեղծված բովանդակությունը կամ ականատեսների վկայությունը պետք է ստուգել, որովհետև շատ էին դեպքերը, երբ որ ասենք չգիտեմ, ժամանակ սոցիալական ցանցում նկարվողներին ավելի հին ժամանակների տորնադոյա, կամ ֆոտոշոփված է, կամ ասենք այնտեղված, հա, եւ խմբագրությունը չէր կարող հենց այնպես վերցնել եւ այն ինչ որ սոցիալական ցանցում հրապարակում է Instagram-ում կամ TikTok-ում կամ Facebook-ում կամ էլ YouTube-ում միանգամից վերցնել եւ իր ընթերցողին տալ, ինքը պետքա ֆիլտրեր կիրառեր։ Եվ այդպես, այսպես ասած առաջացավ սոցիալական մեդիային կամ ականատեսների վկայությունները ստուգելու